Time now for the Inside Dish. This is the part of the show where I talk about maybe a story I've written, something going on in the game. And this week, we've got a special Inside Dish because I'm going to talk about the Hall of Fame vote. Our ballots are due December 31st, so it's coming up. I'm not going to reveal my vote just yet, but I'm just going to take you through the ballot, take you through a bit of my thought process, and also give you some insight into what I believe will be at least my toughest decisions this year. Now, let's start this segment with going back to my ballot from last year, from 2023. Of course, Scott Rowland was the big one. He was elected. I voted for him. Voted for Todd Helton and Billy Wagner. Both of those guys are really close, and I would be surprised if they did not get in this year. Andrew Jones also making a strong run. Gary Sheffield in pretty good position as well. The problem for him now is that this is his last year on the ballot. And then Jeff Kent, who I voted for pretty consistently, he falls off the ballot after his 10th year, only got to 46.5% of the ballot last year. This year, obviously, Rowland is no longer there. Kent is no longer there, but we do have some really interesting newcomers, and I want to talk about them a little bit as we get into this. Adrian Beltre is the numero uno newcomer, and he is a guy that I feel really certain will get huge support and be a likely first ballot Hall of Famer, and he should be. All the numbers are there. He is a third baseman. That is an underrepresented position in the Hall. Sterling character. No one ever said a bad word about Adrian Beltre. He was valued as a teammate. So he's a guy, you can look at the Fangraphs version of WAR. I don't take WAR completely as a guide for the Hall of Fame, but my goodness, he is way up there. Also, newcomers that are of great note, Chase Utley from the Phillies. You see his WAR inflated by his base running and by his defense. Joe Mauer and David Wright. Now, the problem for Utley, as we discuss this, and we'll get into it, he is under 2,000 hits for his career. Since the expansion era began, 1960, no player with fewer than 2,000 hits, no position player, has been elected to the Hall by either the baseball writers or one of the small committees. So that's an uphill fight for him. Mauer got to 2,000 hits late in his career, so he doesn't have that black mark against him. And I'm not sure it's a black mark against Chase Utley, but that is going to be an issue for him with at least some voters. Now, as we get into this thing, let's talk about what I believe will be some of my toughest decisions. One of them is going to be Chase Utley, and it's actually going to be a combination of Chase Utley and Jimmy Rollins. They are quite different as candidates. Jimmy Rollins has more of the counting stat case. He's got almost 2,500 hits. He's got an MVP. He played a long time, played for the Phillies, and was their shortstop and leader. Chase Utley, a shorter peak, but what a peak. And granted, he doesn't have the volume that Rollins has. They're very different as candidates. But he is someone who excelled at every aspect of the game. He was a student of the game, as savvy as they come on a baseball field, and someone who really was a role model for a lot of players during the era in which he played. So my question with Rollins and Utley is that, for me, it's very difficult to separate them on a ballot. I'm not sure either is totally deserving, at least for me right now. Rollins, his offensive career numbers, his OPS plus is below league average in an era that was an offensive era for shortstops. And Utley, I mentioned the volume issue. And I do find it difficult to separate them when I think back to Alan Trammell and Lou Whitaker. Now, Lou Whitaker fell off the ballot the first year. He should be a Hall of Famer. He has Hall of Fame numbers. He was a victim of the crowded ballot at the time. Alan Trammell is in the Hall of Fame. Now, they were different players too. I don't know if they were quite as different as Utley and Rollins, but to me, it's almost a package deal. And I know people will say, that's ridiculous, Ken. Come on, man, this guy's this guy's that. I get it. But they both were impact players for a team that dominated the late 2000s, early 2010s. So that's going to be one really difficult decision for me. Another one, Carlos Beltran. I wrote about him last year, his first year on the ballot, and I did not vote for him. I outlined my reasons. There are a lot of pros for him. Basically, he is a Hall of Famer if you ignore the sign-stealing scandal. And last year, I just found it really difficult to do that. I just felt you don't elect a guy in his first year after what just happened. even though it was really so late in his career and a blip in an otherwise exemplary resume. So Carlos Beltran remains a guy that I'm thinking about and not so sure about. I said this last year and I'll say it again. Just because I vote one way one year doesn't mean I'm closed-minded for the rest of this guy's term or 10 years that he will be eligible for the Hall. I review this every season. I give additional thought to it. And one of the issues with Beltran for me, in a positive way, is actually I believe the Astros players have been punished enough. I know a lot of fans do not agree with that, and they say that's ridiculous. They were never punished by Major League Baseball. But if you look at public perception, if you look at the way the players have been treated, the ones who continued on in the game, and Beltran lost his job managing with the Mets, really hasn't recovered in the game of baseball, I would suggest that they have been punished enough in a different kind of way than Rob Manfred could have done as commissioner. So that's another tough one for me. And then Torrey Hunter. Now, Torrey Hunter, in my view, does not have Hall of Fame numbers. A lot of gold gloves, no question about it. Pretty good counting numbers, no question about that either, but he's a little bit short for me. The problem with excluding Torrey Hunter is that he is a center fielder, a position that, again, is underrepresented. Andruw Jones should be in. Jim Edmonds should have gotten a longer look. He was another victim of the crowded ballot. Torrey, I don't believe, is at the level of either of those guys, but he is a guy who had a tremendous career and certainly is worthy of being on the ballot. I don't know that I would vote for him this year, but I would like to see some more center field representation. And if you want to throw Bernie Williams into that mix as well, another guy who fell off the ballot, he deserved a longer look. So when I put all this together, I just continue thinking about it, especially at this time of year, and actually at all times of every year. This is a constant discussion that I have with other baseball writers, with people in the game. In fact, I've called a number of people in the game this week, managers, former players, people who knew these candidates best, and asked their opinions, because I'm just gathering information, trying to come to my own opinion as best as I can. It is not a perfect process. We all know that. And we all know fans have strong opinions on the Hall of Fame ballot, as they should. It's part of what makes the discussion so great. My view is all opinions are pretty much valid. However you feel about your ballot or a fan feeling about players, that is perfectly fair game as long as you can justify it. And the problem with justifying a ballot every single year is you can blow holes through virtually any argument. And this was especially true of the steroid era guys and remains true of those players, but it's also true of others. If you say, well, I like this candidate for this, and this reason, you can say, well, what about this, and this? Again, that is part of what makes our game so great. I will be revealing my full ballot at a later date. We'll talk about it again, but right now, those are my thoughts.